so much for being here. This is a great room. Feel free to move up and move in and everything. We're so glad you're here. I'm Margaret Mueller. I'm the president and the CEO of the Executives Club of Chicago. It's my pleasure to welcome you for our program, What is the Future of Diversity in HR? This incredibly important discussion is going to explore how the Supreme Court's recent decision ending affirmative action programs at universities can potentially impact corporate HR and diversity programs moving forward. While the court's decision only applies to higher ed, the ripple effects are being felt far and wide, and HR and DEI professionals must expand their approaches to creating diverse talent pipelines to ensure that they are meeting their workforce diversity goals. So today our panelists are going to discuss the solutions for challenges that they see facing the future of diversity in HR and how we all can think about addressing them within our own organizations. Before we begin, I just want to thank all of the organizations and individuals whose support helps the Exec Club thrive. Thank you so much to all of our tremendous seasoned sponsors. You can tell that the business community is showing up in full force, supporting all of our programs. We're really grateful. And we also have a member of our board of directors here, Imran Qureshi, who's head of North America at WTW. Thank you for being here. And thank you to all of our members who are here this afternoon. You are the heart and blood of this organization. We're so grateful for you. If you're not a member and you'd like to learn more, you can either find someone with a member tag or someone with a staff tag. And I know that everyone would be very happy to talk to you more about the organization and their membership. So our program is a part of our HERMAC Institute signature series. So 2 years ago, with Imran's help, the Exec Club joined forces with the Human Resources Management Association of Chicago to form the HERMAC Institute. And this institute brings together a diverse community of HR leaders to tackle conversations that impact issues around talent and organizational management. So we have a lot of exciting HERMAC Institute programs coming up this spring, including our Talent and Culture Summit. We have a panel discussion on AI and the future of talent. So I really hope you'll join us for one of these programs. Just visit our website. They're all up there. And I think some may also be in the program. I know that they're going to try to take questions today. You have the instructions in the program to text EXEC, E-X-E-C, to 22333. You'll get a prompt, and then you can do your question. I know that Coffee will try to get to as many as she can, although she has a ton that she wants to get to on her own. So I'm going to now introduce our moderator and our panelists. So joining us today are J.T. Sharon, an associate in the Employment and Compensation Practice Group at Baker McKenzie. Katrina Jackson, Vice President, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Talent Management at Adtalem Global Education. And Andres Tapia, Senior Client Partner and Global DEI and ESG Strategist at Korn Ferry. And our moderator today is Dr. Coffee Moraney Patterson, Senior Program Director of the College and Career Success at the University of Chicago's Inclusive Economy Lab. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to you. Oh, I have to give you that. Sorry. I literally have to pass it over to you. I didn't quite realize that.
No worries. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited about the conversation. I will just move right into questions so we can ensure we have time to ask questions from the audience. What we'll do is ask them towards the end so that if there's some flow, we can keep it going, but then we'll totally reserve at least 15 minutes to have it from the audience. So, okay, if it works for you, JT, I would love to start with you to help us think about framing this larger situation. I'm in the higher education space, but clearly, this ruling has implications for other spaces. So if you could tell us more about what the rulings mean, thinking about Harvard and the University of North Carolina broadly.
Yeah, Coffee, thanks. So the Students for Fair Admissions case was brought by a student advocacy group challenging the admissions processes at Harvard and the University of North Carolina. Specifically, what they were challenging was the fact that those universities were using race as a deciding factor in the admissions process. And the Students for Fair Admissions argued that that violated both Title VI of the Civil Rights Act as well as the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. As most of us know in here, the Supreme Court ultimately agreed with them and held that race-based decisions were prohibited in the admissions process in higher education. They did kind of give us a little bit of leeway in the fact that race or diversity could be considered when it comes to unique characteristics or things that the students would add to the university as a whole.
Perfect. Andres and Katrina, I would love your thoughts. We've talked a little bit about the university aspect, but like, how are you seeing that have implications for corporations, organizations that are likely represented here in the room?
Yeah, so hello everyone, good evening. I'm very happy to be here and have this conversation. It's definitely a fluid discussion, as we know it's ever evolving. What I would say is, as we've seen the pendulum swing post George Floyd, right? And it's kind of similar to COVID. I liken it to, when we were going through COVID, we saw people showing up at grocery stores with ski masks and all types of scuba diving equipment, right? That was also what happened within organizations post George Floyd. We saw so many performative efforts. We saw so many organizations jumping on the bandwagon without the proper infrastructure. And so what we're starting to see now is that pendulum is swinging back. But the issue is that, and this is what I'm finding, I know that we've had this conversation, is that until DEI becomes a sustainable function within the organization, then we'll continue to see this reactionary effort. So we now saw the reactionary effort post George Floyd, where it was just all, humming greats. Now we're seeing this reaction post affirmative action ruling, where it's now dismantling of the function. And so what we'll start to see now, and again, it's still ever evolving, and we're still looking through the data and what's going to happen specifically within my organization, which is at Talent. I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but we are the parent company for 5 different institutions: Chamberlain University, Walden University, Ross Med and Vet, and then the University of the Caribbean. We produce the most Black physicians in the U.S., and we also have a majority of our student population is people of color. So we kind of live and breathe in this equity space, health equity and education equity. And it's important for us within my organization not only to align ourselves to our mission, but also to just stay the course. And so this is something that we're continuing to see in the space, and we're going to continue to watch it.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I studied history and political science in school, and then went to journalism, and now I do this consulting work. And Ta-Nehisi Coates, the brilliant writer, modern writer, he has a book talking about the power of the Obama years, and not being surprised that there was a huge backlash right after he got elected. And he compares it historically to the end of slavery and the Civil War and the more or less 8 years of Reconstruction, followed by Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan. So, if you look at the macro history of this country, as disturbing as this current backlash is, if you think about it historically, it is predictable. So, in no coincidence, not only backlash to the Obama years, we saw it with Trump, but then backlash to the George Floyd response, and now we're seeing it with these kinds of actions. So we can take a step back, take a breath, and say that, all right, this is awful, and it's existentially a threat, but other things have happened that are existential threats too, and there is a rhythm to this. And the question is then, how do we deal with the backlash? And many years later, we had the Civil Rights Movement and all that means. Many years later, we had Barack Obama and all that means. So now what is the future that we're going to create together as we battle the reactionary forces against the things that we believe in? And to your point, there's some flaws, there have been some flaws in the D&I field, some vulnerabilities that we let go, that we didn't intend to, that some people raised the flags on and said, this is a vulnerability, this is not sustainable. As a field, we did not pay attention to it. So when the challenge came with bad intentions, but it pointed out some weaknesses that are ours to own and ours to deal with. So I think we have an opportunity to not only defend against the attacks, which are very real, but also an opportunity to reinvent, and looking forward to having that conversation this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Andres. Sort of picking up from the idea of reinventing and sort of forging forward, can you just talk broadly about even the value? I think maybe we take it for granted, but some people need to be told the value of a diverse workforce to begin with. Would love your thoughts. I know you've got deep work in there.
Yeah, and I think this is a good moment to start talking about the paradigm shift that we got to do. All of us here, and I have to assume pretty much everybody here, if we're here for diversity, inclusion, and equity, there's something very deep inside of us that has to do with the right thing, equality, social justice, right? And I would be, among the people standing up and say, what drives me every day in my corporate job is fundamentally the need and desire to be part of social justice in our world, okay? However, one of the flaws in corporate D&I, and I'm just talking corporate right now, is that we base the work on social justice. You with me? I'm driven by it, you're driven by it, but in a corporation, corporations are not about social justice. Some rise to that, but in the end, what is a corporation about? It's about a commercial impact, which is financial. And let me give you a metaphor. I grew up in Lima, Peru. I worked there. I earn my paycheck, I earn in soles, the currency, soles. I take a flight, Lima, Miami, Chicago, I get off at the plane and I want to get a Starbucks, and I pull out my soles, and they say, what's that? We can't accept it, I can't give you your, espresso. I had to go to currency exchange and take those soles that have value, that I created, but I turn it into something that I can transact with in the new economy. And I turn it into dollars and I go get my espresso. But that espresso has value based on what I earned in soles. So how do we get comfortable with what I just said, that we cannot base D&I in corporate America on the basis of social justice when we do the work, not our motivation, but doing the work. We have to convert our social justice capital into a financial mindset capital and use the transaction of commercialization and then start making the case. The D&I, as much as many of us believe is the right thing to do with social justice, it is also a commercially powerful thing. That's how you get a sustainable conversation in corporate America. And what is the evidence? More diverse and inclusive organizations, are 33% more financially profitable than those that are not, right? And when it comes to women, it's 15% more profitable, McKinsey study, right? Companies that are more diverse and inclusive make better decision making on an ongoing basis, 50% of the time is Korn Ferry study. Center for Talent Innovation, companies that are more diverse and inclusive have 75% more chance of turning innovative ideas into productized products that got there in the marketplace. Marketplace growth, profitability, new markets, innovation, creativity, and talent optimization. That is the currency that a corporate leader is going to pay attention to. So come back to what happened. If we base it on social justice, while the economy is good and the politics are friendly to this conversation, corporations are happy to be part of that. Economy dips was one of the first programs that get cut. It's diversity because it's based not on the currency, it's based on a foreign currency, if you will, that then when they have to triage, they're not going to prioritize it. And so that has happened up and down with the economy, and now you add a political backlash, and now that becomes, corporations don't like controversy, especially when it's about something that really is not their core product and service. They're like, well, I believe in that, but that's not what we're in the business for. That's not what our shareholders are holding accountable to. That's not what we're producing. So they're going to back off very quickly, and that means that we did not put diversity and inclusion on a sustainable ground. We put it on a sand, a foundation of sand in the corporation. What is the foundation of stone in the corporation? It's a commercial argument. We have to make that argument, and the argument is powerful.
Thank you. Sort of building from that, let's just get specific. For companies or institutions of higher education, for example, in my space, Brown is doing some really creative stuff about doubling down on their commitment. What have you seen organizations do legally, creatively, proactively to sort of acknowledge that this is on the horizon? I'd love if each of you sort of thought about that.
Well, I think to Andrea's point, thank you for that. That was very enlightening. What I look at in this space is that there's actually hasn't been a whole lot of the creativity that happens around DEI. And what I've also found is that the focus always tends to be on, we have to hire more people, we have to recruit more people of color, we have to recruit more, women, more those that are disadvantaged, right? And what hasn't been really talked about so much is really around internally, really focusing truly, before you even go out to the market, with your EVP. Before you even go out to, talk to the marketing organization about what's going to happen externally within your organization, really take a bird's eye view and even a very close view in terms of what does your organization value? What are the key behaviors? I sit within DEI and talent management, so I get to see both the DEI angle, but also how do we execute on DEI, and that's through talent management typically, those processes, the practices, those policies that we put in place. And again, when I've talked to my peers, we've all had conversations around, well, our organization wants to hire more people. And again, that is just not the focus. So really the creativity is about really looking inside out versus outside in terms of what is your organization, going back to the why. Like I talked about before, with the things that have happened externally, with the performative measures that have been put in place, yes, okay, take those down. Let's actually go back to the drawing board and be honest about it, be transparent. We're really looking inside our organization to ensure that when those people do come, when we do recruit, when we do have the bench, when we do have the folks that are in place, that they can stay, that we retain them, that we develop them, that we support them, that we put the mechanisms in place that can really put forth that success that we need to see across representation, but also culturally.
Yeah, and I echo that. And a lot of the companies that we work with on a day-to-day basis, I mean, after this decision came out, they really felt like they're in between a rock and a hard place. Fostering their DEI programs, but at the same time avoiding those lawsuits and things that were being threatened every day in the news. We've worked on some creative legal solutions as far as, from a recruitment standpoint, getting rid of some of the, measures or goals, or not advertising those as much, as they say, what gets measured gets, what gets paid gets measured. So doing away with that and really focusing on kind of like, contrary to what you're saying, on going out into the market and getting as big as pool as they can of candidates, of where are you getting your applicants from, diverse organizations, HBCUs, and other resources along those lines to increase that pool. Looking at recruitment as a funnel, right? You want to focus on the top of the funnel to get the largest pool of the most diverse applicants, and then you as you go down that funnel, you make sure you're avoiding the decisions based on race, based on any other protected category, to avoid those legal challenges. But the pool you're bringing in kind of gives you that opportunity to really reflect the community that you're in, whether it's here in Chicago or in Wisconsin or wherever else in the country you are. And similarly, from an internal standpoint to the programs you mentioned, what we've seen a lot of our clients doing lately is instead of having exclusive groups within the organization, you open it up to everybody to join and be a member, with maybe subsets of groups within that can focus on diverse candidates, women, and other minority groups, in subsets of those larger groups where everybody's a member and everybody can participate, and it doesn't look like you're singling out any specific group to get to the decision-making process that the Supreme Court was not a fan of in the Students for Fair Housing.
Yeah, and one thing that we're also recommending is that, what is the employee value proposition? Come to work for us and we'll help you develop to the greatest of your potential, right? Great. Sounds good. And I think if that's the promise, then it's fair for companies to then hold themselves accountable about whether they're delivering on that promise, in the same way that they make a promise about financial returns to the street, and then they measure if they're fulfilling those promises and whether they achieve them. So this should be no different. But employee value propositions for everybody of every background, widen the talent pool as much as possible, great argument, but then hold yourself accountable to whether you are fulfilling that promise, that you are helping people rise to the fullness of their potential. You do a diagnostic, you do an sort of an impact equity analysis, and let's see what the results say. And I can guarantee you that people of color and women will be disproportionately less able to show and prove that they are rising to the fullness of potential, and the companies that then made the promise can be held accountable, say, whatever that group is, and it's going to be a mixture of people who are from the majority, but disproportionately people of color, what are you going to do to help them rise to the fullness of their potential?
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. I think, HBCU partnerships, HSIs, professional organizations, those are table stakes in DEI. If you haven't already assumed yourself or asserted yourself and partnered with these organizations, that's something that you already should be doing, right? So when we think beyond, expanding of the talent pool, again, going back to my previous point, I'm not arguing that it isn't important to expand your talent pool. I think that's very important. But, we just saw, several weeks ago, the public ousting of Dr. Claudine Gay. We saw another member of the Black community, Antoinette Candia Bailey, who also unfortunately committed suicide. These are two prominent Black women in higher ed that did not have the infrastructure, did not have the support, did not have the things that the mechanisms put in place, as I've been talking about, to assume their roles and to be successful. So if we don't have that, then everything that we're talking about is for naught. So it's really important, again, as an organization, and that's the reason it's probably different than what we're used to, because it is about how do we continue to expand and evolve, etc. But really being real and honest and transparent with not only yourself as a DEI leader, because for me, going through this space is very emotional, right? Oftentimes we take this what has happened in the public space, in the government space, or political space rather, very personally. So you have to really take an inner look, not only at you as leading this work, you as being a team of this work, an advocate of this work, but also within your organization. So another reason why I think it's so important to really focus inward. We did see those two very public things that happened most recently.
Yeah, and if I could add, it's in the vested interest of corporations to not be fools about getting the talent they need. And the demographics that we all have touted for all this time are not changing because of the Supreme Court ruling. The demographics are the demographics. It's inevitable. Half of millennials and even more than half of millennials are young people of color. That is the future workforce, whether you like it or not. That's the future student body, whether you like it or not. And the companies that universities and companies that succumb to fear, we better not widen the talent pool, guess what? They're going to have a much more limited talent pool, and they're going to lose out, right? And same with consumer goods. If they're not paying attention to the diversity of the consumers who buy houses, go on vacation, need insurance, go to hotels, right? Need ballpoint pens, whatever the case may be, they're going to lose out. And so Mark Cuban says famously, you can call me woke all you want, but there goes my customer, right? And the other thing he said is, to the critics of all this diversity thing, he says, can you explain to me why the companies that have stayed the course in diversity, equity, and inclusion are the ones that are performing better profitably and financially? Let's have that conversation. So we say, you want to argue against innovation? You want to argue against talent optimization? You want to argue against marketplace growth? Go ahead.
I think we're done. That's amazing. That's amazing. I think building off of that and thinking about, I appreciate you bringing President Gay into the space, Katrina. How do you, Andres and Katrina, I think in particular, think about balancing backlash, right? Backlash from a push for maybe a diverse workforce versus people who bring in ideas of merit or not being qualified, as we saw in the case with Dr. Gay. Would love your thoughts.
Cannot emphasize enough, data, data, data. You really, really have to have a strong data analytics focus within your DEI strategy. Again, thinking about the labor market, aligning yourselves to that, but also thinking about your internal representation. But again, it's not just about representation in the numbers. The data is also qualitative, right? So one thing that it's probably controversial, but I'll share. One thing that we are going to be doing soon in our organization. I know that again, post George Floyd, we had listening sessions, and we really focused on people of color. We really focused on those that are considered minoritized, et cetera, within the organization. Did we ask or did we have any conversations with our white women? Did we have any conversations with our white men? So one aspect to this is really trying to listen and learn. What are some of the things that they're valuing? Why are we, having this conversation? What are we afraid of? What are the fears that are asserting themselves into the room? And so this is one of the things that I think, at least internally within our organization, that we're focusing on is not, excluding, because that's really what has been the view, even though we know that's not what it is, right? Really looking at how do we create a truly inclusive strategy while also bringing people along the journey. And I will say that I've had a lot of lessons. Internally I've had a lot of lessons, but also within the organizations that I represented where in the beginning, it was more so around bring everyone along the journey. It's about communication. It's about change management. You know, everyone is had the rally cry. They know that we need to do this. It's the right thing to do, right? But now it's more so about bringing people along with the listening and leaning in and a learning ear, not just about those that are considered, again, disenfranchised, disadvantaged, et cetera, but also those that are still the majority, right? Still typically in leadership positions. They also seen that studies have shown that affirmative action, since we're talking about it, we know that white women are the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action. So given that, what is the conversation that we're having, right? How do we ensure that, okay, aside from affirmative action, what are some of the things that we need to do within our organization to make sure that, again, everyone is included in this conversation in a meaningful way, that we're bringing everyone to the table? So that's one thing that we're focusing on.
Yeah, and to Katrina's point about the power of data, that is, when I talk about the currency of the corporation, data is one of those currencies, right? Because decisions are made in the end about what the data tells you, about the marketplace, about your workforce, et cetera. And one of the flaws in first generation diversity was that we were not data driven, other than representation. But we didn't use data to make a case. We just used data to say the lack of a case, right? Like, we're not diverse, but so what? You know, how we need to use data to make the case that if we become more diverse, all these other positive things will happen, and to demonstrate it, in a sophisticated data analytic way, which is both quantitative and qualitative. And we have really not been mature enough and sophisticated enough to really bring the best of data forth. And I tell you, 90% of my time was the CEOs and the C-suite. And when we present data, they have nowhere to hide. Hear me. They have nowhere to hide. But you got to have the data airtight, sophisticated regression analysis, right? Root cause drivers and things like that. But once it's there, they are leaders of integrity. I mean, they will, if the data, whatever their emotions are telling them, if the data's there, they go, okay, let's talk what we need to do.
And I would just say, you need to have people who can help interpret that data, right? Like, I think as a data scientist, so just to say that's my background, it's really important the ways that different groups will interrogate the exact same piece of data. So just double downing on that really important point. Katrina?
And I was just going to add, and I know those in the room are already doing this work, but shout out to JT here on the legal side of things. I am so tight with our legal department now. We are like this, okay? Because it is so important now, especially in this space, to make sure that you understand your organization's risk aversion. What is your organization's tolerance for the risk? Because we know that DEI is an inherent risk, right? And so partnering with legal, partnering with the data analytics function or the HRS function, et cetera, is very important at this time. We actually have monthly meetings where we talk about, what is it that we're looking to accomplish? How do we then, make sure that we are leveling the playing field in terms of the language that we're using, in terms of the things that we're wanting to put forth. Those are, again, very important as we move forward in this space.
Katrina, that was beautiful for my next question, which is to ask JT. They are coming after people, right? These students for fair admissions, they're not actually just stopping in higher education. One of their most recent complaints is against a Women of Color Capital Venture Fund, the Fearless Fund. So how do you think about that in your role? How do you think about that? In some ways, to Katrina's point, this work might position you for those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, DEI programs are not illegal in any way, shape, or form, regardless of what we hear in the media, right? This is good for companies. This is good for organizations. Everything that Andres and Katrina have said is exactly right and exactly why organizations are committed to doing it. Me being the, I guess, Debbie Downer of the group and telling you what you need, what you should and shouldn't do is I think the focus really needs to be on the overall goal of what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve a diverse workforce, not necessarily hit a goal or a quota or a percentage. Those things will flow. I mean, we all know the numbers, the data, right? It's horrible, right? You look in law firms and 90%, I don't know the stats, but it's, you look at the firm bios and it's 90% white males, and we're not there yet. Now, there's a commitment to getting there, but how you do it is how you protect yourself from a legal standpoint, and that's, taking out the quotas, taking out, or maybe not advertising, the percentages that you want to hit, even though they're goals. If you're incentivizing meeting those goals, you're probably going to face some backlash at the end of the day. But really focusing on how we get there and really using the data to foster and not build that program on the sand, but really be a fundamental part of your business is what's going to keep you away from the legal landmines, or at least the meritorious legal landmines at the end of the day.
Yeah, in terms of the context of this legal challenge, what have we seen in the marketplace at Korn Ferry? I would say we saw a deer in the headlights response and a turtle response. Here's what I mean. As soon as the challenge came, and it came the day after the Affirmative Action ruling, the letters went out to the Fortune 500 CEOs. We're coming to you, after you next. So there was a bifurcated response. The deer in the headlights and the flight, right? A deer just scampering fast and furious. Yep. That was a certain percentage of companies. But another percentage of companies actually had a turtle response where they just stopped in their tracks and went into the shells. They didn't flee, they didn't move away, they didn't intend to move away. They just knew that there was all this stuff going on, not a good time to stick your head out. A time to huddle with legal. Yep. What's our response? We're still committed, but we still have to manage the risk. And it was a good, healthy response. And they got their act together, and they figured it out, and JT has been talking about some of those responses. And now we're seeing the turtle response starting to get their heads out and starting to sort of move forward, not lost. What does it tell us? After George Floyd's murder, the response, it was amazing, we couldn't believe it. But underneath, we knew that it was a soft sense of support there. And we knew that a lot of that response was performative. But we also knew that a lot of that response was real and authentic. Now we're seeing which were the performative responders and which were the authentic ones. It's borne out very well. So, and in terms of the ones that were for authentic and real, I've seen a really good dynamic happening, like to Katrina's point, D&I getting closer to legal and legal getting closer to D&I. They've been contentious. They have not necessarily friends. Always saw legal as getting in the way. Yeah. But now D&I say, oh, legal is going to help me protect us, right? Right. But I've seen legal in those corporations that took that authentic thing really come in with a caring thing. Look, we got to be careful. Here are the red flags. We're going to address that so that you can do the work. You get that? Yeah. And that's where the friendship and the symbiotic relationship comes in, because legal sees not only the legal threat, but they are there as corporate counsel concerned about the economic threat if companies do not attract the most diverse talent force in the history of this country, which is an existential threat to companies that they can't do that.
It's not nice, but it's kind of nice to see that it's not just in higher education that people are completely misreading the ruling. So what you've seen in higher education is, to your point, universities being like, oh, can't admit anyone, must not, and that's actually not what the ruling says. The ruling's actually clear that you can use race, for example, in your personal essay, but you just have to connect it to the characteristics of what make you show up as sort of a better person. So you get universities like Brown that say, and Vassar, that say, okay, we can work with that. And then you get some universities, and unfortunately I'm an alum of one, that say, we have to entirely get rid of all of these programs. How are you all thinking about those conversations of helping other people really understand the intention, well, not the intention, but legal ways of understanding the ruling that don't equate to fully removing or fully scaling back work that might be really good?
Everybody's turning to me. I mean, I think we're having those conversations at a regular basis with our clients, and it all centers around, I think, everything we've been talking about today, as far as what is our ultimate goal, as far as achieving diversity within the workforce, and how are we going to get there, without specifically using factors such as race or other categories that are protected under the law. And like I said, it's opening the funnel. It's increasing the access of programs and groups within your organizations to everybody, and just funneling in the most diverse, most talented group of folks that you can get.
Yeah, and I'll get very tactical here. At Korn Ferry, we had a long-standing, very successful program called the Power Choice, and we've done longitudinal studies, and it's really the most effective program for advancing talent of color and underrepresented talent. And we've done longitudinal studies, and we have the data for it. But it was Power Choice for people of color, or Power Choice for African Americans, Power Choice for Latinos, LGBTQ. So we broke it down by the different identity groups. Well, we can't do that anymore, because then it's differentiated development, which it is, for a particular group of people, and that's what's sort of seen as making a company vulnerable. But the power of the power of choice still remains, and it's based on a lot of research about what has been the key critical success factors for any professional of any background to advance to the highest levels of their potential. And then the study then added, where is it that underrepresented groups may be underperforming to the benchmark against those criteria that were found. So we've repackaged this as the power of choice for all. And it is available to everybody. And to JT's point, once you're in the group and it's more diverse, and now there's people from the majority, white males, because they feel that they need that, because the data tells us that those criteria for success are true for everybody. It's just that underrepresented talent underperforming that for a lot of reasons that we all know. But then within that, we can create cohorts, for a breakout group by identity, self-identified. And that then gives us a sweet spot. And by the way, we now are seeing that's actually a better solution. Because it gets us, because power choice for people of color was always under critique about why them and not us. We don't have to fight that anymore. It's power of all. The company has a criteria. Remember that promise that you rise to fullness of potential? Who is not achieving the full potential? It's this diverse group, including people from the majority. Okay, here's this course to help you level set. And then within that, we address all equally, and then allow for the differentiation to happen within that design.
I really like that. I hadn't heard of that, but that makes complete sense. It actually aligns really well with a lot of human rights research when looking at accessibility, saying that we shouldn't call things special rights. It shouldn't be a special right to be able to enter a building with dignity. All humans should be able to do that. So I think that model actually very much mimics that, right? Everyone has entry, and then from there we do that. So that's actually really cool. A few last questions before we open it up to the lots of questions streaming in from the audience. JT, I know we keep picking on you, but I'm gonna start with you on this one. Are there any other lawsuits that should be on our horizon? Or not on our radar, rather, on the horizon that should be on our radar?
The big one that jumps to mind is the Florida Stop Woke lawsuit that just got struck down at the 11th Circuit for being unconstitutional. Yes, exactly. So that is, DeSantis is threatening to appeal, so we'll see if that actually happens. So that's one to keep an eye out on. The other one, I don't have a particular lawsuit, but we are seeing an uptick in reverse discrimination cases where white heterosexual males are bringing suit based on some of these programs. There was one that's recently filed against a large media conglomerate that essentially it's by what's the group's name? I always forget it. Sorry, the Stephen Miller's group, America First Legal. Essentially saying this individual wasn't promoted or given opportunities that other individuals and minority groups were, and as part of that lawsuit, their proof of discrimination is the company's advertisement of, we've achieved 40% of women as writers on primetime shows, or we've had 50% of our cast members are minorities on primetime shows. So that's what we're seeing as far as using some of this data, or even maybe these goals, as being kind of proof of discrimination. Now, to be clear, the goals themselves are not proof of anything. It's okay to have the goals, it's just a matter of how you get there.
Perfect. So I'm gonna ask a quick question. Megan, sorry to call you out. I was looking for a sign that said 15 minutes, but you're cool and sent it in here. I don't know when you sent that. Just now, perfect. Okay, I was like, do I have time or don't I? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so lightning round. I'm going to ask you 2 final questions, and then we'll move on to audience questions. So, lightning round. I'd love to hear from everyone. The first question is, how can we collectively dismantle myths surrounding affirmative action and deservedness more broadly? The myths. Like, for example, I really appreciate you saying that, which we've known for a long time, that white women are actually the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action. I don't think most people know that, though. I think when we think about affirmative action, most people think Black people. So how can we collectively work together to rewrite that narrative so that more people feel included in that story?
We should just start a TikTok, I guess. I don't know. That's what seems to get the kids going. No, I think that I think collectively it's just important for us to all kind of be speaking the same language. I think over the years there's a lot of different things that have been put out there, cultural competence versus cultural humility, which I know that we're talking more so now in my organization. Just really having the facts and the data kind of firsthand. I think that would be really important for us collectively as DEI practitioners, but also within, across organizations to really know the facts. But also, keeping your ear to the street. Like, what is happening? To JT's point, there's a lot that's happening out there. So many articles. I mean, I'm always bombarded with DEI-related articles, anti-woke articles, as well as I know that they recently have been attacking the Crown Act, which is hair discrimination for those of you that don't know. And then also the Rooney Rule as well is being kind of under attack as well. So, there's things that are happening that I think is important for us to just be aware of, but also for us to be speaking that same language around what is and what isn't.
As a writer, I'll go to the use of words. Should we keep using the term affirmative action? Should we keep using the word diversity? I think, on the one hand, keep trying to defend, explain, talk about affirmative action. I think that's a losing proposition, because it's been struck down, by the Supreme Court, whether we agree with it or not, and it's sort of a legal thing that there it is, right? And the arguments that we're making is that, okay, we can't make these targets, we can't make these explicitness, so that kind of is what affirmative action kind of said you can do, and then now we're said affirmative action is done, at least, well, it's done in corporate for a long time, and then in terms of not putting quotas, right? However, when people say you should stop using the word diversity, even among allies, I vehemently oppose dropping the word diversity. And I'll tell you why. As much as everybody's tried to make diversity about everybody, and it did start with people of color, particularly African Americans, and then it expanded, and that had its problems, right? Obviously, we want to include everybody, but then it took the ball, eyes off the ball of the original issue that we're trying to deal with. So that was a problem of a dilution of the word diversity, but it was an all-encompassing thing which had a sort of a benefit. But in the use of the word diversity, people keep, in the end, no matter how hard you try, they kept saying, oh, you're talking about people of color. And when they're trying to argue against it, like, hey, diversity, oh, you're talking about people of color. Okay, so now follow the thought. If people are now telling us to drop the word diversity, what are they saying? If they've always put people of color and diversity as one thing, no matter how much we try to expand it, and now say drop the word, they're saying drop the issue. If we succumb to dropping the word diversity, we are surrendering the core original battle for people of color. So, it's good, healthy debate we have to have here, but I really stand on that one. And this is a hard one because I have allies, white allies, who have been in the trenches on D&I saying kind of the same argument I just made about affirmative action, don't fall on that sword. And I just said, that's fine, I'm gonna let go of that one. But this one, I think this is the one to hold on to, because the attempt to erase the word diversity as a relevant issue for the longest time has been about people of color, is means to erase us. And that's why I say we fall on the sword on that one.
I don't know that I have much more to add except for the fact that just the discussion and the education, internally within the organization is critical to, do away with maybe some of the misnomers or the views that people have on the word diversity, the word affirmative action, whatever your program's called internally. and help them understand the purpose behind it and why it's important for the organization to grow and evolve.
Perfect. And then Megan told me I have to ask this question, so I'm gonna ask it. What is one takeaway you would recommend to today's attendees that they could implement right away?
Okay. One takeaway is stay the course. I think that there's so much that's happening as we've talked about, and I think that this topic, again, as I said in the beginning, at the onset, is just very fluid. It's evolving. Stay the course. DEI is not going anywhere. We are not, succumbing, as you said, Andres, to what's happening out in media, what's happening out in the political space. I know we're up for election this year, which God bless us, Lord. But I think, stay the course. Also, if you are a DEI practitioner, if you're a leader in DEI, I have been in this space for quite some time, and I know we have some DEI OGs in the room. I won't call them out, but when I first started out in this work, it was really from a place of passion. I was tired of being the youngest, the only Black person, the only Black woman in the room. I was tired of not seeing people that looked like me in spaces and places that I felt like I did not belong. And it was from that place that really helped me to kind of catapult within my career. But I implore all of us to move from passion to purpose, because with purpose, that's drive. With purpose, you're able to see the value and the impact of your work. And when I was sitting in passion, again, it's both. It could be both, right? It's both and. But when I was in that passionate space, that's when I did feel like the company martyr. That's when I did feel so victimized in this space, because you are the one that's standing up saying, well, why this? Why that? You're challenging the status quo of what you're doing, right? And so really it's important for us, those of you that are working in this space, to really think about the why. And that also goes into thinking about the why within your organization. I talked about that at the beginning as well. As you think about just going back to the drawing board, why does your organization want to focus on this in the first place? What are we doing? Is it because you want to see more people of color or more diversity in your workplace? That's not really going to get you where you need to go, right? What is the why? What is driving your company to get to that end result? Once you figure that out, and again, there's a lot of mechanisms where you can, again, do the qualitative, quantitative data, you can do the listening sessions, you can do all the things, right? The surveys and assessments, and I really, again, encourage all of us that haven't already done the work around the current state, like where are you today within your organization? What are the things that your organization values? How do you incorporate DEI into the mechanisms, those people processes, whether it's succession, performance, talent planning, et cetera? That can be the ways that you continue to have that integration and continue to see the success out of your work. So those are just some of my little nuggets that I'll share.
Call legal. No.
Who are you going to call?
No, everything Katrina said is exactly right on. The one thing I would say is get creative. I mean, once you understand your why and what you want to do, is get creative. These programs are great. They're great for the organization, and they're great for the company's longevity. And then, obviously, we get creative and we work with legal, and we can do these things in a very effective and efficient way and avoid some of the risks that we kind of see and hear about in the media.
Yeah, in the wake of what happened, many of us in the D&I field have, we see it, right? Walking around with our heads down, overwhelmed by the bad news. It's been depressing in many ways. But the thing I want you to, hopefully that you can take away today, is that you should be fierce. And there's, because not only there's a lot at stake, but number two, we can stand on solid ground here in the companies that employ us, because they need us, they need the diversity, they need the inclusion, they need the equity, they need our wisdom, our knowledge, and yes, our passion, right? But to the point that was just made is that we gotta drive with purpose, and that purpose has to be, wrapped around in courage, so we can be fierce, because the attacks are fierce. They're only going to intensify, but do not cower, and there's plenty of things that are solid to stand on, and hopefully you saw some of that coming through across the four of us here, and that's what I would like you to take away. And the second thing is, do not let those forces pit us against each other. We got brown and black, Asian, indigenous, gay, and the forces out there are intent and having us battle with each other, divide ourselves, because they know that that's what weakens us to the point that they can then overwhelm us with their agenda. Do not succumb to division among us.
Thank you. Yeah. Amazing. So I'm going to open it up to a few questions with the time we have left. Okay, JT, this first one is for you. You talked about the funnel, but avoiding decisions based on race. Would you counsel against capturing race and gender in your internal processes at all, or how would you recommend people move forward with that?
No, I think you still capture race, gender, all the EEO categories that you always have. It's just a matter of those decision points, right? It is, as long as those aren't the basis for the decision, tracking your progress and tracking your goals and where you're going, where you started, where you're going next, that's all fine. So that's completely thumbs up from legal.
Okay, perfect. Thumbs up. All right, Katrina, the next one's for you. Katrina mentioned stay the course regardless of the backlash. How do you keep the champions of your message encouraged and engaged when you must pivot?
Okay. The interesting thing about DEI is that it's very personal to everyone, right? And I would say that, in my organizations, the organizations that I have worked in around this space is, building a really strong ecosystem. So with the ecosystem, it typically has a top-down, bottom-up approach. We typically have champions that are or change agents that are in place. We also have, obviously, the ERGs that are a part of this work as well. But really, what I found is that those people that are part of the movement or part of the ecosystem, those individuals are already, wanting to move forward because they're looking to us to say, well, what are you doing as an organization? So as they're looking to us, the conversation is more so about these are the things that we're willing to do or wanting to do so that we continue to, again, stay this course. But also we understand that there are some things that we need to ensure that we're mitigating risk. It's a both and conversation, and I think Andreas had a really good point about, continuing to move forward while still being real about the reality.
Thank you. Andres, you mentioned that data shows that diverse companies are more successful, so why aren't companies all in?
I mean, that is the question, right? And I think that is probably a consequence of the weakness of white privilege. If you are in a world that is not diverse, your leadership team, your country club crowd, who comes to your house, the neighborhood you live in, you think that's the world. And you have no idea how diverse the world really is and how diverse your customer base is. I mean, I think that the reason they don't see the business case is because they don't see us. But we are here. And the companies that see us are the ones that are on the sustainable path. So that's my answer. I think it's blinded by their privilege and their cocoon existence.
I agree completely. I'm not even a panelist, but I've got to sort of weigh in. I also wonder about the crippling fear of having to actually compete with everyone. There's something to be said about actually not competing with everyone for things. And I wonder if subconsciously that is a part of some of those things.
You know what I would call that?
What?
White privilege.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. I would call it the same.
Yeah, because we all have to compete.
Yes, yes. Okay, what strategies have been successful in collecting accurate and complete data? Anyone can answer that.
So yeah, I've done this a few times now. So some of the strategies that I've used is a true current state analysis. So really looking at, first you look at the quantitative data. So looking at all of your representation across all demographics, but not only just looking at that as face value, but also looking at the mobility within your organization. So what are terminations looking like? What is your hiring practices looking like? Is there actually a correlation? Do you see that your black colleagues within your organization are being terminated involuntarily or voluntarily at a higher rate than their white counterparts, but then we also have a smaller black population? That's a problem, right? So the data can help to paint that picture, and doing a true evaluation of that is important. I tend to go back a few years, so 2 to 3 years, just to see what are the trends that might take place. And then the qualitative piece could be around surveys, obviously, that you could implement within your organization using your engagement data, even if you are able to slice that by demographics, as well as, you know, I'm an IO psychologist by trade, so focus groups are our thing, right? So focus groups are always great. You know, depending on the culture of your organization, you could look to have that as an intact focus group with the demographics intact, so a focus group specifically around specific identities, or you could look to have focus groups that have everyone in the room that is a more diverse group of voices. So that's really how I would look at it as a current state, and really looking at overall how all of the trends and the correlations play a role across both of those kind of sets of data. That's where you'll be able to come to some really good factual information, take that to your leadership team and talk about what are the disparities and gaps that exist across the organization.
Yeah, and if I could double click on that, you know, in the context of that methodology, because you have all that and the correlations you're talking about, if you're not familiar with this term, I encourage you to look it up afterwards, a driver analysis, a regression analysis, because there can be 8 different things, 8 different factors, and they're all real, they're all symptoms, but you want to find out what are the 1 or 2 core ones that are driving the results, right? And that requires really working closely with your data analytics people and saying, I don't want just a dashboard of activity or, you know, these disparities, but I want to understand why the disparities are happening. And it's amazing, when we do a lot of this analysis too, there's often where the core reasons are not what you expected. So everybody expects there to be a disparity, right? But why does the disparity exist? And that is so unique to each company.
And I'll just add, if you haven't already, your population that you ought to be focusing on is your people leader population. They're the ones that can make or break a strategy, a DEI strategy, a culture in an organization. So anything that comes out of that data analysis, there has to be some type of change management and really bringing them along, because again, they're the ones that are making the decisions around hiring, firing, promotion, termination, etc. So that's really important as a part of your strategy, that they're a focal point as you look to move that forward.
We're out of time. I'm so sorry. I know there was other
We could
questions.
talk about this for hours.
I could do this forever. Thank you so much to our panelists. I would love to welcome Imran Qureshi to do our closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, the words that came to mind as I was listening to you were insightful, hopeful, and uplifting. And I just thought it was just such a terrific discussion. So just by way of background, Imran Qureshi, I lead North America for WTW, or Willis Towers Watson. I'm also on the board of the Executives Club. And part of the value of us being here together is not only to listen to the insights and perspectives that we heard today, which were absolutely incredible, but is to continue the dialogue. So we have an opportunity now to spend some time together at the Terrace Lounge to the right, and we have drinks and we have hors d'oeuvres. So please continue the conversation, and thank you again.